Welcome to the Jameson Files. I'm your host, Carrie Weber. Thanks for joining us for another episode. We are really excited to be joining you today from Grapevine, Texas, at the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry's annual meeting. We're thrilled to be back at the AACD meeting. It's been some time, and so happy to be here with the Jameson team. But I'm especially thrilled that we're spending some time today with our client, a great friend, Dr. Cappy Sinclair. So Dr. Sinclair, thank you so much for being with us.
Glad to be here.
And before we started this episode, we were reminiscing that Dr. Sinclair was the Jameson Files' very first podcast guest when we launched the podcast in 2019.
And I got invited back.
I know. Look.
It did something appropriate.
It was a success.
Yeah.
So we'll see how you do this time.
Yeah, awesome.
No pressure. But, thrilled to be here because I do want to invite and encourage. There are 2 episodes with Dr. Sinclair from very early on in the podcast, and I invite you to go find those episodes because I still feel like they're very powerful, and you shared some great information and insights in those episodes.
I talk about that probably at least once a week to someone that reaches out, like, how did you get to where you were? What did you feel like was the most important thing that you did? And I still feel like one of the most important things was setting up where I wanted my practice to be, because without that vision, I would not be where I am today.
I love that. And, speaking of establishing that vision of where you are, not only in how your practice runs and how you practice, but in the clinical skills that you do. I mean, you have chosen to become deeply involved with the AACD and have been for several years now. So would you tell us a little bit about how you chose to be a part of this organization and a little bit about how you started within this, because now you are an accredited member. And so that's, for those of you that aren't familiar with that process, boy, that is a feat. I mean, that's a lot of work and effort.
Besides starting my practice, I would say that's probably the one thing that I've learned more about anything else in dentistry. Making myself a better dentist, seeing what education I should take, where I directed my attention. All of those things were because of trying to become accredited.
Wow.
And now being on the other side, we're starting to mentor other people that are going through this process.
Yes.
And having the insight of going through it myself, I can give them experiences that I learned along the way that hopefully will help them out.
I love that. Yeah. So tell a little bit. I love the story of kind of the beginning of your relationship with this organization.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty special for perhaps young doctors that are just getting started and really trying to find your way. So will you share that with the audience?
So this meeting's special in particular for me at Grapevine because this location was the first AACD meeting that I came to in 2010.
Okay.
Some background is I was actually working close by. I worked in Oklahoma City. I actually did not know you guys all the time, which is crazy.
That's a strange connection.
But I worked for a group practice there, and I just wasn't happy. And so, long story short, is I ended up quitting that job in May or April. And I knew this was going on in Dallas, so I tried to time my leaving that job with coming down to this meeting. So I think I left on Friday from Oklahoma City, packed up my stuff, and then drove down here to the Gaylord. The problem is I had just quit my job. I was in tons of credit card debt from traveling back and forth all over the country, and I didn't know what to do. So I couldn't stay at the Gaylord, which was probably like $600 a night or something crazy. So I ended up camping. There's a campground actually a mile and a half away from here. So I ended up staying there for about 4 or 5 nights. It was beautiful. There's a lake that's there. I got to watch the sunrise and the sunset every day. But I would ride my bike every morning from the campground over here. I didn't know a soul, but the dentistry that I saw here changed my life. It was something that I was like, one day I want to do what these people are doing here.
Wow.
And it was that drive and ambition that I think really fueled me continuously over the years.
Yes.
So it was an experience I'll never forget. I drove the rest of the way across the country, back home. And then 2 years later ended up starting my practice with the vision of knowing that I wanted to be on the stage accredited someday.
Wow.
So
that, and where are you staying this year?
I'm actually staying in the hotel. which is great.
A success story. It's a true success story.
Yeah.
I think that's so amazing. And I love that this was one of those pivotal moments for you that really started to create the framework of your vision for how you practice.
Yeah.
But something that I really appreciate about you is, as long as we've known you, you have truly and intentionally sought out resources, training, both clinically and for your business side of your practice, with a really great, kind of taking your idea of your vision and seeking out the right resources for you, because you're also very involved in other, not just AACD.
Right. Yeah.
So would you share a little bit for those that are perhaps trying to find their resources, their training, their people, or whatever organizations? What do you go through when you're trying to say, okay, this is where I'm going to explore at this time?
I think the hardest part for being a dentist, and especially if you're a solo practice owner, is there's only so much time for you to, one, leave the office.
Yes.
And if you're going to be doing that, like, how do you make it count?
Right.
So they're really, if I leave the office, it's for a vacation, which I love to travel.
Yes.
Or I'm going to go to do some educational event. So I think for me, when I was trying to establish, again, where I wanted to go in my dentistry, who are the clinical leaders in the world that are going to be the best dentists for me to learn from?
Right.
And how do I get there? And what's my path? And how do I start at some of the more basic things and move forward? I think that's the biggest challenge is with social media today, a younger dentist graduating is just barraged with clinical photos on Instagram of before and afters, but they don't see the journey that the dentist went through to get there. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, want a really quick fix. Like, what's the one course that I can go to make the difference? And there's not one course. It's going to COIS. It's going to a functional occlusion, learning how the teeth work, how function masters and creates the proper aesthetics. Business training courses. How do you, once you do the dentistry, how do you sell the dentistry to your patients? How do you motivate your team to sell the dentistry to your patients?
Right.
All of those courses, I think, compound into your education. And if you're just going to take a course on the weekend because you like the location, then is that really the best place to go?
Yes.
So just because it's a course on implants and you want to place implants, is that the best place for you to start? Or do you need to learn how to take teeth out first?
Yeah.
So again, if you're a dentist learning or wanting to expand your horizons, I would actually say figure out where the baseline is first. It might not be the sexiest place to start, but it's probably the best place from a foundational aspect, and then build from there.
I think, for doctors that are looking to expand the way they practice, the way, or even just how perhaps the depth of their skills. My father, John Jameson, very identical mindset and mentality of you, which if he were here, he would say, one of the greatest investments I made for myself was continuing my clinical training and education. And he chose his people, his resources, his organizations to be a part of, and never stopped as long as he was practicing until he retired. And so I don't know if this is good news or bad news for younger dentists, but it's not over at graduation.
No.
Like, it's just starting, because at that point, there's a lot of work to be done for your own self and your own skill set, your own efficiency, your own level of success, whatever that is. So the vision is so important of, like, where do you see yourself in the foreseeable future? What do you want that to look like for you? And then I love your point of, like, start at the very beginning. Where am I right now?
Right.
With my skills or with my business or whatever. And where do I just need to start?
Yeah, master the basics is really, it's very, like, again, most great athletes practice the fundamentals before they become great. So again, it's the same process of just practice, but practice the basics and get good at that.
Yes.
So,
the last time we were sitting across from each other like this, you were in a lot has happened since then, since 2019.
Yeah.
You have, You now have a business partner.
I do.
Dr. Mark
I do.
Reichley.
Yeah.
You now have taken 2 locations between the 2 of you, and
Yep.
you have combined them into the most extraordinary facility.
Yes. It's awesome.
It's gorgeous. You both have continued to invest together in clinical training, but also you've invested in your own. You've done deep work together as business partners in aligning your vision and probably recasting a vision that makes sense for the 2 of you.
Yeah.
So tell me about that journey from that point forward and how that all has, what were the lessons learned and the successes that you're the most proud of?
Yeah. So obviously I knew what my vision was, but trying to find someone that would agree with that vision, align with that vision was very challenging.
Right.
So, the story, I had several associates that we went through trying to find another fit.
Yes.
Nothing worked out. I was running between 2 practices myself, like trying to make the decision of, do I just consolidate things and make them smaller? And as just luck would have it, I reached out to Mark, who I'd met several times over the years in Virginia Beach locally, and told him what I was trying to do, and he was like, I'm in. And that was probably, besides just going through accreditation, another one of the defining events of career in the last several years. As many people know, dentistry is a very isolated job, and having the ability to have another dentist to work through problems. He and I are different personalities. We see things from different perspectives. We do different dentistry in certain cases, which is great too. So it's always great to have like, hey, will you look at this case together?
Yes.
But and it really hasn't happened until the last 6 months, because 6 months ago when we moved into one practice, we never practiced together for the last 3 years. So when we are now in the same office, we sit right next to each other in the morning. It's cool just to pull up stuff on our big screen and be like, hey man, what do you think of this? Or like, be pumped up about a case we just delivered and be like, check this out, this is awesome. And really through the day, we're just hyping each other up all day and feeding off each other's energy.
Wow.
But there are challenges too, because you have to make hard decisions, like what are we doing in cases now where finances are getting tighter for patients and we have to do budget restrictions in certain areas. But it's good to have someone on the same page of being like, hey, if this is where the practice needs to go, these are the decisions we need to make.
Yes.
But just growing to where I am now, I don't even know if I truly believe that we would ever get to where we are now. And it's awesome.
And I love that you said, like, talking about another one of the defining moments. You do indeed have some specific defining moments, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
So when it sounds like you get a lot of conversations going with doctors asking, for your advice or your insights. What are the questions that you feel like you get asked the most frequently from dental peers and colleagues? And what are those, what's the top guidance that you tend to give them?
A lot of people do ask, how do I like a partner? Because they're looking for an associate or someone else. And for me, having a partner has reduced a lot of stress in my life. My wife will share that as well. Going through COVID was amazing to have someone else to, again, just talk through things on a daily basis, figure out all the government funding things. And that's where I think that was a tough test, because actually, I didn't even mention this, but right before the world shut down in February, we bought a 3rd practice. And so it was crazy trying to manage all of this stuff. And then on top of that, a pandemic. And then on top of that, we were building our new building. So we had all of these hands in different pots. And it was great to have someone else to help manage things together. So I didn't have to be on every meeting. He didn't have to be on every meeting. We could balance things together and then reconvene as a team and say, hey, check in, where are you? What is the next thing going on? But trying to find someone that aligns with your vision, I would say, is the fundamental part if you're looking for a partner. We don't agree on everything. We don't agree on how we do dentistry in certain cases, but we both know that we're trying to make a better life for our patients, better life for our team, better life for each other.
Yes.
And having that common goal and vision of knowing where the practice is going, that's been probably the most important thing for the two of us.
Oh, love that. So, Dr. Reichley, if you're watching, you are appreciated.
Yes, very much. Very
You're
much.
appreciated.
The second thing that I get asked is, when you learn how to do the dentistry, how do you get the patients that want the dentistry?
Yes.
And part of the process of going through with you all and with several other CE events and how our process is built within our practice is asking more questions. And I think that's the thing in dental school. You graduate and you're like, I just need to educate the patients until they understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
But if the patients are never asking for it, they don't care what you have to say necessarily.
Right.
So they might agree with you just to be polite and get out the door. But giving patients more accountability for what they're trying to do in their life and their goals and their dentistry and their health is been getting a lot more patients say yes. That was probably another one of the initial moments that I had, was it clicked and be like, all right, I just need to shut up, ask some questions and see what the patients want. One, see if they're a right fit for our practice.
Right.
But two, see if I can provide what they're looking for.
Yes.
And so that's, I think, really challenging and we have team members that are hygienists that come right out of school, and that's the hardest thing for them to learn is they just want to sit and educate because they have all this knowledge and they just want to tell everything.
Right.
So
right.
like I can do all this, but if the patient's not asking for it, are you investing your time appropriately?
Yes.
So I would say that those two things are probably more of the questions I could ask. The last is education. Where do you go for education?
Right.
This is a phenomenal meeting if you're interested in aesthetics or just want to be a better dentist. And then the Coy Center has been phenomenal for me. It's Mark and I have done that together, which is great as well. So having a partner going through the same CE. So again, if we're going to implement something new in the practice, how do we do it? Is it something we want to implement? So that's been really helpful too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, two very powerful pieces. I mean, but it all goes back to the same thing. It actually all goes back to one of the original episodes that we did with you, was because the decisions that you've made, the person that you now share that business with and are growing a thriving business with, it all boils down to clarity of vision.
You're intentionally making decisions. It's
intentionally making decisions.
You're not going through and just being like, all right, it's Tuesday.
Right.
Like, what do I have on my docket that I need to, like, what are you doing to move the needle forward? What are you doing?
Right.
And it's incremental growth. It's not something that, I mean, I know you love James Clear, so it's atomic habits. It's something that you have to put into motion over time that will develop into a habit. It's not something that you flick the switch and then all of a sudden things get rolling.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, it's easy for you to share with people what courses, what organizations, what companies, you know, what training is best for you. But if people don't get their own personal vision clear, they're going to chase resources and training that's not the right fit for them, because it works for you because you know what you know the goal you want to achieve through the utilization of that tool, that training, of that company, of that organization, and that's what matters. And then that you and Dr. Reichley fully understand that you're not clones of each other. But that's probably why it's working so well, because it's an alignment of the vision. It's an alignment, a shared philosophy.
We keep each other honest. So again, like, I'll get really excited about something and he'll be like, hey, let's check this idea. Does this fit? And so it keeps us both honest of like, are we heading in the right direction?
Yes.
And sometimes, like, I might be like, you know what, you're right.
Yeah.
Or sometimes like, hey, this is how I'm looking at this in terms of moving us forward in our vision. And he might be like, oh, that makes sense to me now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that, again, if you're just looking through everything through your glasses and your own perspective all the time, you're going to agree with yourself a majority of the time. You're like, oh, I'm a genius. This is the best idea ever. I can't wait to tell my team.
You're just waiting for the awards and accolades to come, right?
Versus telling Mark and being like, hey, we're going to do this. And he's like, are you sure? Yeah.
Yeah, it's, for me, I feel like it's having a person that's a spark to you, that it either stretches you or challenges you in the best of ways. And allows you to grow in perspective and in your intention. And I think that's so great. So, going back to the vision, but also executing on the vision, because I think your story is not just the clarity, intention behind things, but you genuinely, what you need to do, what you need to seek out, where you need to improve, and you actively seek out and make momentum for yourself by making decisions, by doing things, by investing in yourself and your practice. And I think that's important too. It's one thing to know where you want to go. It's another to execute a plan.
Part of that's believing in yourself.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of dentists out there that have challenges with that, of believing in themselves. They'll take the same course multiple times, hoping that the next time will give them the push to do it in the practice. And I think as a dentist, you have to be more forgiving for yourself, knowing you're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
And you're not going to harm anyone severely by doing something that you've had training on.
Yes.
But unfortunately, I think dental schools kind of perpetuate that mentality for a lot of us of it's very challenging to do something knowing that there's potential of failure. So you're trying to eliminate that risk as much as possible. But the only way that you will learn and grow is through those failures.
Yes.
So you have to experience those. And again, one of the things was starting a second location. Probably not the smartest thing or the most successful thing that I've ever done. But it taught us that refining our vision, again, my initial vision was having multiple locations. Mm-hmm. Mark and I have talked now, and having a single office where we can control and evaluate the excellence that we want to produce is going to be much easier and give us way more satisfaction throughout our career than having multiple areas all over, or multiple offices all over there.
Yeah. Well, and also the level, the clinical level that the two of you deliver and execute on and want to see delivered in your practice. I mean, that's it is a very special place.
And it's ideally it should be scalable from a thought process, but it's not.
Right.
Or at least not how we want to do it.
Right.
So,
right.
And we're okay with that now. We were not okay with that. Because we both had the idea of like, this is where we were headed. And to admit that that's not where we wanted to go was basically a gut check for us and be like, hey, this is a failure from the aspect of how we're organizing our business, how we're doing a practice. And so we scaled back down, and both of us, I don't think, have been happier a while. So it's been really good for us.
Jess always likes to say, and I'm pretty sure he stole this from a book or something, failing forward.
Yeah.
He want to fail forward because, all of us as leaders and business owners, I think it should be written somewhere in some kind of handbook you're given when you like start a business or purchase or buy a business or whatever that. You're going to fail.
Yes.
You're going to mess up. You're going to make a bad decision or whatever. You're going to lose an amazing whatever. And the key is to learn from that.
Right.
Like, don't go into the cycle of insanity where you're just repeating the same thing over and over again. Learn from the mistakes. Learn from the fails. Yeah. Because that's going to make the next season or the next case, the next practice or whatever it is better because you learned lessons through the failures.
Right.
So I love that. I mean, and you just continue to make decisions and invest in yourselves, and you continue to change and evolve, and your business is a beautiful, thriving team, practice, facility, everything.
And it will keep evolving. That's the cool thing about it.
And your vision might change again. And so when you come back as a guest the next time, we'll talk about all the new things that have happened.
It does involve a building. I don't know if Mark or I ever want to go through that process again. It's very
beautiful now. You got there. You got to that finish line, and it's gorgeous. If you are curious about Coastal Cosmetic and Implant Dentistry, go find them online and go see this beautiful facility for yourself and the beautiful work that you and Dr. Reichley do for your patients and the amazing team that you have behind you. So
I wouldn't be here without my teams.
Yeah. Congratulations on how far you've come since the campground in 2010. Amazing, amazing story. Thank you for sharing so genuinely and openly. And Dr. Reichley, we are thinking of you too, my friend. So thanks for being with us, Dr. Sinclair. And thanks to all of you for joining us for another episode of the Jameson Files. Be well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. See you next time.